Hola! My name is Amanda Lohman, and this is my November Spanish Contact Hour presentation. So, my summary of my contact hours for this month was for an hour I watched a movie on Netflix in Spanish called The Snitch Cartel or El Cartel de los Sapos. And this movie took place in Colombia, and it was about a boy who grew up around the cartel, and there was a lot of emphasis on drug lords and their power over the impoverished country. And the boy eventually became a member of the Colombian cartel, and he used his involvement to try and win over his childhood love, Sofia. The second thing I did was listen to the radio for about an hour and a half on a Pandora station called Latin Pop Classics. And I typically had it on whenever I was online doing the Spanish homework or whatever other homework I had to do. And this Spanish station played a lot of artists that I had already been familiar with through their English songs like Shakira and Enrique Iglesias. But there was also a few other artists that came on a lot as I listened to it. And it was artists like Juanes, Daddy Yankee, and Jesse and Joy. The last thing I did was watch another movie for about an hour and a half, and this one was Penguins of Madagascar. I watched it translated in Spanish with English subtitles, and the reason I chose this was my sister is currently in Spanish taking high school Spanish, and she had to watch an English movie in Spanish for one of her assignments, and I figured why not just join in and use it for mine too. And so the movie's basically about the four penguins, Skipper, Kowalski, Rico, and Private from the Madagascar movie, but it takes place in like the whole storyline before they ended up in Madagascar, and they become part of this like undercover task force called the North Wind, and they try and save the world. So the vocabulary that I learned from the movie El Cartel de los Sapos, todos los rincones del país is all over the country. La selva is the jungle. El tráfico de drogas is drug trafficking. La boda is the wedding. And guerra is at war. And las hembras is chicks or females. They used it to like talk about and like slang about the girls that were like over there. And the cultural nuances that I noticed in El Cartel de los Sapos, there was definitely a lot of strong plot twists. I noticed like typically in English movies, there's like maybe one main plot that goes throughout the whole movie and it like builds up to the climax and then resolution and everything. But within this Spanish movie and a couple of the other ones that I've watched over the months, there seems to be more than one, and it hits you hard with like a bunch of different ones after another. The actors also have very strong facial expressions, it seems, in Spanish films. They tend to wear their emotion on their sleeve, and you're never unsure of how they're exactly feeling because it's displayed very strongly. Also, there were a lot of love stories incorporated into this one, especially the main character who was doing all of this involvement with the cartel, trying to win over this girl that he's been watching since he was little. And also the drug cartel. So in this movie, that was the main subject. And it was interesting to see how they described like the power that was controlled over this drug cartel over the whole country. Like there was no way around it. This kid grew up in and around the cartel, and it showed like how when he was little with him and his friends, they were being taught how to make drugs at a really young age, just in the house, casually in the kitchen, like it was no big deal. Like it was really interesting because things are definitely not like that in America, and especially not in American culture. And then for the radio, the new vocabulary that I learned was Bailando por Ahi, and that was dancing around or dancing over there. That was in one of the songs. Oración is sentence, and I sounds a lot like song, which is canción. So I thought that was kind of interesting because like song and sentence are fairly similar. Veloz is fast. Dedicarte is dedicate. Las hecho is fact. And mezclando is mixing. Cultural nuances from the radio station that I listened to. I really like this Pandora station, the Latin pop classics. A few of the artists were even Spanish DJs. So there was some Latin electronic music that came on, which was different than what I've used to be listening to, like on the station. It was kind of mixed into it, and I was surprised because it sounds a lot similar to the kind of music that I usually listen to, like English electronic music, which is kind of cool. All the songs are definitely upbeat, and it really made me just want to dance around. And love was also a reoccurring theme in the songs as well. Typically, the love songs seem to be slower, and you could hear the emotion like actually being poured out of the lyrics. And Spanish music in general, I noticed there was a just full of like really good songs, and there's definitely purity in the voices of the artists, and they sounded very natural and lots of instruments rather than like within English music. It seems so rare nowadays to actually hear the true voice of the artist because so many people auto-tune or edit their voices out. So it's definitely like a refreshing experience to listen to the Spanish music. The next thing and the final thing was vocabulary from the Penguins of Madagascar. And I learned that pingüino is penguin, vigilancia is surveillance, el barco is the ship, los pájaros is birds, el pulpo is octopus, and la sombra is shadow. And the cultural nuances from Penguins of Madagascar, there was a lot of dramatic voice fluctuations, and the facial expressions again like were really bold. Like even though it was obviously an animated movie, like it just seemed that like within the Spanish like translations that it made it like so much more emotional, or like you could hear it coming out of their voice. And I thought that the Spanish translation fit really well into the context of it, just because like the accent was actually added into the animals like voices or character voices, and it made it honestly more funny to watch it in Spanish per se, I guess, just because like hearing these penguins and different animals within the movie that were like animated talking in Spanish just sounded way funnier than listening to it regularly in English. So it was honestly more entertaining. And then in conclusion, I still enjoyed the immersion of Spanish language into my daily life. Music, I've got to say, is probably one of my favorites now to listen to or to hear in Spanish, just because it's something that I involve with like all the time anyway. It's just I'm always listening to music. So having something new that I now can kind of understand a little bit better and hear it in a different language is really cool. And it's still pretty hard to pick up on the words when they're spoken quickly in movies. But I did notice that listening to the songs, it's a lot easier to understand just because of like the repetitive structure of music in general with like the chorus and the verses and how it's repeated throughout the song. Makes it a lot easier to kind of pick up on a word, and then you can take your moment to like think it through what it actually is. But that's all for now. So thank you. Bye.